In the halls of the city's most prestigious hospital, a desperate search for answers is underway. But when a 14-year-old girl ignored by everyone dares to speak, she challenges the very foundation of modern medicine. This is the true story of how genius can come from the most unexpected places. In the heart of St. Mary's Hospital, a crisis was unfolding that had left even the most brilliant minds in medicine utterly defeated. The hospital, renowned for its cutting-edge technology and world-class specialists, was now the scene of a desperate mystery. In room 304, an 8-year-old girl lay motionless, her small body trapped in a coma that had lasted 3 agonizing weeks. Her parents watched helplessly as teams of doctors came and went, each more prestigious than the last, each leaving with the same answer: "We don't know."
Ow.
Blood tests, every possible test had been run. Every possible diagnosis considered and discarded. It was as if the child's body had simply decided to stop responding to the world, and no one could explain why. The hospital's conference room was filled with tension and exhaustion. Over 100 doctors had been consulted, flown in from across the country, each bringing their own theories and egos. The air was thick with frustration, the kind that comes when science meets its limits. Some doctors argued for rare neurological disorders, others for exotic infections, but every test result came back normal. The patient's brain scans were clear, her blood work unremarkable, her vital signs stable but unresponsive. The best minds in medicine were stumped, and the sense of failure was palpable. It was in the midst of this chaos that a quiet, unexpected voice cut through the room. "With all due respect, doctors, you're looking in the wrong place." The words hung in the air, sharp and clear, and every head turned in disbelief. Standing at the back of the room was Amelia Johnson, a 14-year-old girl with bright, observant eyes. She was the daughter of Linda Johnson, one of the hospital's cleaning staff, and she was not supposed to be there. The doctors stared at her, some with annoyance, others with outright contempt. Dr. Richardson, the head of neurology, nearly choked on his coffee. Dr. Peterson, a famous cardiologist, didn't even bother to look up from his notes. "Girl, you shouldn't be here," he growled. "Where's your mother? She should be cleaning the hallways, not letting you disturb professionals trying to save a life." But Amelia didn't flinch. She had spent her childhood in these very hallways, quietly absorbing every word spoken by doctors as she waited for her mother to finish her shifts. What none of them knew was that Amelia possessed a rare gift, an IQ of 180 and a photographic memory. She had first revealed her talent at age 10 when she corrected a doctor's medication dosage in passing. Since then, she had become a silent observer, learning from every case, every mistake, every triumph and failure she witnessed in the hospital's corridors. Now, as the room simmered with disbelief, Amelia spoke again, her voice steady and unwavering. "The patient does not have a neurological condition," she said. "She has lead poisoning." "Severe and chronic?" The reaction was immediate and cruel. Laughter echoed around the table, chorus of experts dismissing the idea as childish. Dr. Martinez, the hospital's top toxicologist, shook her head. "Young lady, we've already tested for lead poisoning 3 times. All negative." Amelia met her gaze calmly. "You tested her blood," she replied. "But you didn't test her bone tissue?" Lead deposits in the bones when exposure is long-term and intermittent. The symptoms she presents: sadical seizures, gradual loss of consciousness, resistance to anticonvulsant medications are classic signs of chronic lead poisoning with bone redistribution. The laughter faded, replaced by a heavy, uncertain silence. For the first time, the doctors were listening. Dr. Richardson, clearly irritated at being challenged by a teenager, demanded to know where she had learned such things. From Harrison's Pediatric Environmental Toxicology, 5th edition, pages 347 to 392.
What?
Amelia answered without hesitation. And from Dr. Nakamura's articles on heavy metal redistribution during periods of physiological stress, published in the Journal of Environmental Health between 2018 and 2022, the room shifted. These were not facts a child could simply Google. These were advanced, specialized references, known only to experts in the field. Dr. Martinez tried to dismiss her again, insisting that a 14-year-old could not possibly have access to such literature. Without a word, Amelia pulled a visitor's badge from the university medical library out of her pocket. "I've been studying here for 4 years while my mother works," she said. "No one ever questioned my presence, because apparently I'm invisible to you." The humiliation in the room was thick, but Amelia stood her ground, her eyes never leaving the doctors who had dismissed her so easily. As the silence deepened, it became clear that Amelia Johnson was not just a clever child. She was someone who had seen what no one else could see, who had listened when no one else cared to listen. And as she stood there, unwavering, it was obvious to everyone in the room that she knew more than anyone realized, than that the answer to the hospital's greatest mystery might just come from the most unexpected place: the room. Once filled with the hum of medical jargon and the clatter of coffee cups, now simmered with a different energy, one of bruised egos and disbelief. The doctors, their authority challenged by a teenager, quickly shifted from laughter to indignation. Dr. Peterson, his voice dripping with condescension, scoffed at Amelia's theory, observing patients. "Girl, you don't have a license. You don't have supervision. You have absolutely nothing that gives you the right to have an opinion on medicine." The others nodded, their faces a mix of irritation and embarrassment. But Amelia stood her ground, her gaze unwavering. "I have eyes," she replied simply, "and a memory that doesn't forget details you ignore because they don't fit your preconceived diagnosis." The air thickened as Amelia began to recount, with unnerving precision, the very details the doctors had missed. She reminded Dr. Richardson of his initial suspicion of a brain tumor and the clean MRI that followed. She quoted his exact words, "Interesting. The symptoms suggest an intracranial mass, but we don't see anything on the tests." She turned to Dr. Martinez, recalling how she had dismissed poisoning after the first negative blood test, never once considering the child's environment. "How could you know what we discussed?" Dr. Martinez demanded, her voice tight. Amelia answered without hesitation, "Because I was here, cleaning the floor next to my mother while you discussed the case in the hallway, treating patients like academic puzzles instead of human beings." The doctors' faces shifted from annoyance to discomfort as Amelia continued, her voice rising with a quiet authority. She exposed not only their professional oversights, but also their personal weaknesses. All gathered from public records and overheard conversations, she revealed Dr. Peterson's ongoing malpractice case, the suspension of his medical license for improper prescriptions, and Dr. Martinez's rejected research papers due to confirmation bias. She even cited Dr. Richardson's below-average diagnostic rate in complex neurological cases, referencing an internal report from the previous year. Each revelation landed like a blow, stripping away the veneer of infallibility the doctors wore so proudly at that moment. The conference room door opened, and Linda Johnson appeared. Still in her cleaning uniform, her face etched with worry. She had been searching for her daughter, fearing the consequences of Amelia's boldness. "Amelia, what are you doing here?" Linda's voice trembled, caught between relief and dread. She knew her daughter's brilliance, but she also understood the risks of a young black girl confronting authority in such a public way. Amelia, however, did not waver. "Mom, they're killing that child out of pride," she said, her eyes never leaving the doctors. "They know what the problem is, but they'd rather let her die than admit that a cleaning lady's daughter might have the answer." Dr. Martinez, her composure slipping, turned to Linda with a sneer. "Mrs. Johnson, control your daughter. This is an emergency medical meeting, not a playground." But Linda, drawing on years of quiet strength, straightened her shoulders. "My daughter has an IQ of 180, she said, her voice steady. "Diagnosed by the psychology department of this very hospital when she was 10. Maybe you should listen to her instead of belittling her." The room fell silent, the weight of Linda's words settling over the assembled doctors. Dr. Peterson let out a bitter laugh, trying to regain control. "And I'm Albert Einstein, reincarnated." But Amelia was ready. She turned to him, reciting details of his career and legal troubles, all public knowledge, all devastatingly accurate. The color drained from his face. She did the same for Dr. Martinez and Dr. Richardson, each time exposing the cracks in their professional facades. The doctors, once so sure of themselves, now looked at Amelia with a mixture of fear and respect. Asterisk, Dr. Richardson, his pride wounded, slammed his fist on the table. Enough. I will not tolerate being questioned by a minor with no credentials. Amelia laughed, a sound both bitter and triumphant. I have been present at more medical consultations in the last 4 years than some of the residents in this room. While you go out to your dinners, I sit here absorbing every word, every decision, every mistake. The tension in the room reached a breaking point. Dr. Martinez, desperate to reassert her authority, issued a challenge. Prove it. Prove that the patient has lead poisoning conclusively. But if you're wrong, you and your mother are banned from this hospital forever. Amelia met her gaze, unflinching. You just made the worst bet of your career, she replied. I already know where the contamination is and why your tests failed. She requested to be taken to the pediatric ward. Her confidence unshaken. As the doctors hesitated, a new voice spoke up. Dr. Michael Chen. A young resident who had remained silent until now stepped forward. With all due respect, Dr. Martinez, the girl cited literature I know well. 3 weeks ago, I suggested additional tests for heavy metal poisoning in this patient. You dismissed me, saying I was too young to understand complex medicine. The room fell silent again, the hierarchy of authority crumbling as another voice joined Amelia's. The battle lines were drawn, not just between a girl and a room full of doctors, but between pride and truth. As Amelia prepared to prove her theory, the tension in the room was electric. For the first time, the doctors realized they might be standing on the wrong side of history, as the doctors reluctantly allowed Amelia to approach the case. She did not waste a moment on the usual medical charts. Instead, she asked for something no one else had bothered to request: the details of the patient's daily life, her home, her habits, and her environment. While the doctors watched, some with skepticism, others with a growing sense of unease, Amelia quietly questioned the girl's mother. She learned that the child spent several afternoons each week in the basement art studio of their residential building, painting pottery with brightly colored glazes. The building itself was old, built in the 1950s, and had only undergone superficial renovations in recent years. The art studio, poorly ventilated and rarely cleaned, was a place where children gathered, their laughter echoing off walls still coated in layers of ancient, lead-based paint. Amelia's questions were precise and relentless. When did the symptoms begin? How often did the child attend the art classes? The answers formed a pattern that no one else had seen. The seizures and fainting spells had started just a few weeks after the girl began her pottery classes. The timeline was too perfect to be a coincidence. Amelia's mind raced as she recalled the medical literature she had devoured in the library. How chronic lead exposure, especially in children, could go undetected for months, hiding in the bones and only surfacing during periods of physical stress or rapid growth. She turned to the lab results, scanning them with a sharp eye. The numbers were subtle, almost unremarkable. A slightly elevated serum iron level, a mild decrease in hemoglobin, a touch of microcytosis, small red blood cells that had been dismissed as a normal variation. But to Amelia, these were not random findings. They were the fingerprints of chronic lead poisoning, the kind that builds up slowly, quietly, until a child's body can no longer compensate. She explained to the room, her voice calm but urgent, that lead stored in the bones is released into the bloodstream during times of metabolic stress, such as after fasting, illness, or even a growth spurt. This explained why the blood tests had missed the diagnosis. The lead was only present in detectable amounts during these brief, critical windows. Dr. Chen, who had been silent until now, stepped forward, his face alight with recognition. He supported Amelia's theory, pointing out that the pattern of intermittent symptoms matched the cycles of exposure and release she described. He admitted that he had once suggested testing for heavy metals, only to be dismissed by his superiors. Now, with Amelia's insight, the pieces finally fit together. But Amelia was not finished. She warned the doctors that this might not be an isolated case. If the art studio was the source of contamination, then every child who spent time there could be at risk. She asked Dr. Chen to access the hospital's patient registry and search for other children from the same neighborhood who had been admitted with unexplained neurological symptoms in the past 6 months. The room held its breath as Dr. Chen typed, the tension mounting with every keystroke. The results appeared on the screen. 7 children, all living within a few blocks of the same building, all with similar symptoms. All regular attendees of the art program. Amelia opened her notebooks, thick with handwritten notes, maps, and addresses. She had been quietly gathering information for months, talking to families in the hallways, listening to their stories, and piecing together the puzzle that the doctors had missed. She showed them how each child's symptoms began shortly after joining the art classes, how their test results mirrored those of the original patient, and how every clue pointed back to the same source: the basement studio, the old paint, the cheap ceramic glazes. The realization swept through the room like a cold wind. This was not just a single case of misdiagnosis. It was a public health crisis. It's one that had gone unnoticed because no one had thought to look beyond the boundaries of the hospital. The doctors, their pride now replaced by fear and shame, understood the gravity of their oversight. Amelia's final revelation stunned them into silence. She calmly announced that she had already contacted the public health department 3 days earlier, providing them with her findings and urging them to investigate. An official inquiry was already underway, and inspectors would soon arrive at the hospital. The doctors, once so certain of their expertise, now realized that it was a 14-year-old girl armed with nothing but observation, compassion, and relentless curiosity who had uncovered the truth they had all missed. The silence in the conference room was absolute, broken only by the distant hum of hospital machinery. The doctors, once so certain of their expertise, now sat in stunned realization of the magnitude of their failure. Their faces, once proud and dismissive, were now pale with the weight of what had been revealed. They understood, perhaps for the first time, that their pride and rigid adherence to protocol had nearly cost not just one child her life, but had endangered an entire community. The consequences for their careers loomed: large reputations built over decades, now threatened by the truth a 14-year-old had uncovered in a matter of days. Amelia stood before them, her presence calm and unyielding. She explained, with clarity and precision, the flaws in their testing methods. The standard colorimetric tests they relied on were simply not sensitive enough to detect the low levels of organic lead that accumulate in children exposed to counterfeit paints and old building materials. She described how she had anticipated every defense they might raise. Having listened to their conversations and studied their habits for years, she had known they would dismiss her, just as they had dismissed Dr. Chen's earlier suggestions. And so she had prepared every piece of evidence, every reference, every detail to counter their arguments before they could even voice them. As the doctors processed this, Amelia reached into her bag and produced an official envelope, the Harvard crest gleaming on its surface. She revealed that she had been granted early admission to Harvard Medical School, the full scholarship, and a place in a joint research program with the Pediatric Toxicology Department. The committee, she explained, had been particularly impressed by her independent research on differential diagnostics in underserved pediatric populations. The news landed like a final blow, shattering any lingering doubts about her abilities. The doctors, who had once seen her as invisible, now saw her as a force that could not be ignored. At that moment, Inspector Chen entered the room, accompanied by a team from the Public Health Department. The investigation was to begin immediately, and Amelia was asked to guide them to the index patient. Before leaving, she turned to address the doctors one last time. Her words were measured, but carried the weight of years spent in the shadows. She spoke of the prejudice and arrogance she had witnessed, of the casual disregard for those deemed unimportant, and of the costs such attitudes had exacted on their patients. "For 4 years you treated me as if I were invisible," she said. "You talked about patients in my presence as if I were a piece of furniture. You never imagined that a poor black girl could not only understand medicine, but master it better than you. That arrogance, that prejudice disguised as scientific superiority, almost cost 8 children their lives." The aftermath of that day rippled far beyond the walls of St. Mary's Hospital. 2 years later, Amelia walked the halls of Harvard as the youngest researcher in the history of the pediatric toxicology program. Her protocols for integrated environmental diagnostics were adopted by St. Mary's, leading to the early detection and treatment of dozens of children who might otherwise have been overlooked. The hospital, once a symbol of unassailable authority, became a place of learning and humility, its staff forever changed by the lessons Amelia had forced them to confront. Doctors who had dismissed her faced the consequences of their actions. Dr. Martinez lost her medical license after the investigation revealed systematic negligence. Dr. Richardson was dismissed from his post when families armed with the truth filed lawsuits against the hospital. Dr. Peterson, unable to recover from the legal and financial fallout, declared bankruptcy. Linda Johnson, once a cleaning lady, now ran the community medical education program her daughter had created, teaching families how to recognize environmental hazards and advocate for their children's health. Amelia's journey reached a new height when she was awarded the Young Scientist of the Year, standing before an audience of doctors, researchers, and students. She delivered a speech that resonated far beyond the walls of the auditorium. "Arrogance is blind," she said, "but humility sees truths that titles cannot teach. Knowledge without compassion is just ego in disguise. True genius is not measured by age, color, or class, but by the willingness to listen, to learn, and to care." Her words were a call to action, a reminder that the future of medicine depended not on pride, but on empathy and open-mindedness. As the applause faded and Amelia looked out at the faces before her, she remembered her mother's words, "Knowledge without compassion is just ego in disguise." She had proven, through courage and relentless curiosity, that true knowledge always triumphs over prejudice, turning injustice into revolution. If this story inspired you, subscribe to the channel for more stories that show how the power of learning and compassion can change the world.